Welcome, welcome, welcome to I Change the Narrative, a podcast for and about Black men, inspiring, supporting, and empowering Black men and Black boys. Today's topic is Black barbers and Black barbershops. Before we start the conversation, I want to ask our guests to briefly tell us about yourself and the work that you're involved in that lends itself to the topic or the lived experience. I first want Professor Dr. Quincy Mills to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Quincy Mills. I'm a professor of history at the University of Maryland in College Park. I teach and do research on African American history. I am the author of Cutting Along the Color Line, Black Barbers and Barbershops in America, which traces the evolution of African Americans' entry and transformation of the barbering industry from the 1830s through the 1970s. And so I hope to lend some of that to the conversation today.
Thank you. Mr. Antonio.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Antonio Johnson. I am a visual artist and author of a book titled You Next, Reflections in Black Barbershops. The book explores shops throughout the United States through the lens of identity and wellness. Very happy to be here and see a familiar face, Dr. Mills, and have this great conversation today.
Thank you. Mr. Aaron.
I'm Aaron Williams. Hello, everybody. Retired now, barber. I was a barber for 23 years. Started off in the kitchen like a lot of us did when I was around 13 or 14. And mainly because my mother used to cut my hair, and it was just a terrible experience. I decided to take matters into my own hands very early in life, and it led me from New York to Maryland. It was a very fulfilling and gratifying career. And even though I am retired, I still love it. I still appreciate it, and I'm always going to encourage it, and it's something I'll still teach my sons.
Awesome. Sherman.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am, as you can tell, probably the only person here who doesn't need a barbershop, but I go. Okay, Aaron, thank you, bro. But I go. Often I have a lot of friends who are barbers. It started with my cousin cutting my hair in the basement. And I go to the barbershop because it feels like it's the last bastion of Black male bonding. And so I go to get shaved, but I go to talk politics and sports and relationships and all the other things that are important to us in life.
Awesome. Thank you. Adafo.
How you doing? How's everybody doing today? My name is Adolfo Calray, and I am originally from Chicago, Illinois, now residing in Richmond, Virginia area in Chesterfield, Virginia. And what lends itself to this conversation is I embarked on a journey to actually document barbershops and barbers in the United States. I went to about 12 or 13 cities, and I'm still doing it. And what fascinated me about this was the barbershop I attended or went to in Richmond, Virginia. They were actually, it was actually a home away from home. So in a barbershop, I met so many people over a 20-year span that I thought that it was time to document it, and not only document it in that particular barbershop, but go around and see the commonality between various barbershops in different areas. So Dr. Mills is part of that documentary. His book, I want to promote your book, Dr. Mills. Because his book is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal piece of research that actually made me go in a different direction in terms of documenting, because I think we need to understand the foundation of Black barbers in this country. So it's a lot of, well, we'll get into some other things, but that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So the barbershop, it's more than a commercial public space or economic necessity. It's unfiltered conversations, a camaraderie of your all-time top five, a cultural forum where sneakerheads gather, a place of unspoken rules. Some shed their hair while others bare their soul. It plays a vital part in Black communities and serves as a pillar for Black men. It's also a sanctuary of safety and the core of the Black man's beauty and a major part of his identity. So, in the midst of adversity, as toddlers, adolescents, and men, there has always been one place that Black men could go to express themselves, no matter what corner of the globe you stood. And that hub is, of course, the Black barbershop, the epicenter of the Black man's culture. I want to throw my first inquiry to Professor Mills, Dr. Mills, as he formally researched the beginning of Black barbershops and its Black ownership. As we all ingest social media, it seems that barbering and the Black barbershops have exploded out of nowhere, it seems. So briefly walk us through the history of how these spaces were established or when this phenomenon began.
Yeah, so the phenomenon itself, or if we call it a phenomenon, the space for Black men to become barbers certainly begins in slavery. Masters wanted someone, particularly someone Black, to care for them, to groom them, to sort of be their body servants, and so it was enslaved men who would do that work. Once there's a way in which, as enslaved Black men were barbering for their masters, in many cases, they were also being hired out to barber in commercial barbershops. And those barbershops were owned, particularly in the South, by free Black men. White men didn't want to be barbers, particularly Native white men, because they associated barbering with servile labor, unskilled labor. And of course, they didn't want to do the same work that Black men did or that slaves did. And so that left the field pretty much open for free Black men to take up the trade, to shape the profession in a certain kind of way. Immigrants didn't mind being barbers, but again, white customers wanted to be shaved by a Black man, right? And so Black barbers essentially sort of had a corner of the market in some ways. And certainly, once we get to freedom, where things begin to change a bit, white men still want to be shaved by Black men. And let me just sort of quickly say that the idea that barbering was unskilled was all about race. It was the fictions of race. I don't know anyone watching has ever had a shave with the straight razor. Trust me, you want to be sure that person has the skill to hold that razor. So it wasn't so much that barbering was unskilled, it was that it was racialized. It was that any job that Black people did was considered a job that had no skill. And so again, those were the logics of race, the logic of racializing a group of people. And so when we get to, say, the 1880s, 1890s, and certainly, I think it should be clear that that free Black men, certainly before slavery and certainly after, they catered to this wealthy white market. When I say catered to them, meaning they didn't even allow Black men to come into these shops to get their own haircuts, right? And so these are Black-owned barbershops with white customers. And these Black, barbers made, a crap load of money catering to these wealthy white men in public spaces. You ask, well, where did Black men get their haircut and shaved? Well, they got it cut in the front yard, in the backyard, in people's homes, right? Just not in commercial shops. Those sort of Black-owned and Black-patronized barbershops don't come about until the late 1890s, the 1900s, and certainly by the 19-teens, they come about in great fashion. And particularly, this is a time where, as we know, Jim Crow emerges. And so that's a big factor. Two, African-American men born after slavery come of age during this time, and they expressly want to open shop for Black patrons. But also the Barbers Union gets formed in the 1890s, 1900s. And this Barbers Union was formed particularly by German immigrants. they were barbers in Germany. They didn't mind being barbers in the U.S., but they also wanted to sort of move Black men out of this lucrative market. And so this is where the licensing laws come about that we have today. And so you had to now go to a barber college, which of course Black men didn't have access to the barber college. You had to know the anatomy of the body. They attached themselves onto this public health movement of, okay, we have to be sanitized and, all these things, which is not a problem. But again, these were things that were used to sort of muscle Black men out of the trade.
Wow.
And so by the Great Migration and certainly thereafter, it's clear that Black barbershops were essential spaces in Black communities because those were some of the only, and beauty shops as well, some of the only spaces that, one, that Black people owned, and two, that Black folk could gather outside of the surveillance of white folks. Mm-hmm. And so, but three, this is also one of the only sort of avenues of business that Black men could enter with very low barriers to entry. So it didn't take a whole lot to open a barbershop. You certainly have to get one or two, maybe three chairs for the shop, get your lease, get your equipment, you're good to go, right? You didn't need $100, $200,000 to open up a shop. We didn't even really need a shop. You just needed clippers, right? Some of these brothers said that they got their haircut in the basement or started cutting in the basement or in the kitchen. That wasn't any different in 19-teens, 1920s, right? So this is a space that Black men have access to where they can have some kind of economic autonomy over their lives, right? Even if one didn't own the shop, those barbers still worked independently, right? They have to give a little bit to the owner, right? Whether it's a percentage or they were renting the booth, but at the same time, they controlled their time. And I think that was really critical. And so I'll just sort of stop here to say that it's important that we remember that barbershops are not and have never been static. How they are, they've been made, right? So the barbers and the people who frequent those spaces have made them what they are. And so there's some shops today, 1960s, even today, that are hotbeds for conversation and engagement, and they're really pillars of their local communities. And there's some shops that are not, right? That you have to have an appointment, and you go in, you get your hair cut, and you shave, and you go out, right? And so there's a diversity of Black barbershops, and I think they're all great. I'm not gonna cast aside any of them, right? I think that we have the space to have kinds of shops in our communities, and I think that certainly played out over the course of the 20th century.
Wow, you just gave us a lot. Thank you so much for that. So that moves us to Antonio and Adolfo. Why did you all decide to do a project or work around this particular subject?
Well, who you want to go first?
It doesn't matter.
You can go first, Adolfo.
All right. Thank you, brother. So I'm going to try to make a long story short. So okay. I finished Virginia State around 1997. And so I decided not to go back to Chicago. So I needed a barber, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to stay in Petersburg. No shot to Petersburg, but I wanted to move to Richmond. So a friend of mine that went to Virginia State actually told me about a barbershop in Richmond, and it was Harvey's Barbershop, which is on First and Broad. It's a historic barbershop. If anybody remembers the Afro Master pick, it's a pick that's the teeth of the comb is kind of sideways, and then it has a long handle. So the guy that actually invented that pick owned this barbershop in Richmond. So it's Harvey's Barbershop. So if you Google Afro Master, Franklin Harvey Sr. actually invented that. That's just a little side piece. So I go into the barbershop in 1998, and from 1998 to 2019, that became my second home. And that barbershop lended everything that I needed outside of my home. So it was an opportunity for me to vibe with brothers of different backgrounds, vibe with brothers, different skills, different expertise. And so it was so many of these individuals in the barbershop that it really made me start to think like, this is amazing. Like Black men to talk about, changing the narrative, everything in here was anti whatever the narrative was about Black men. So these are fathers, these are committed men, these are people that are taking care of their communities, these are people that are supporting their community. Yeah. So I started to see the value in the barbershop. You talk, you see movies or you hear people talk about it, but to actually be immersed in it and to actually feel the vibe of that barbershop, it was truly amazing and life-changing. So instead of, I would go to the barbershop every week, but to get my hair cut, but I started to go to the barbershop 3 and 4 times a week, just to talk, just to get things off your chest. You learn so much in the barbershop. So you got to realize you can have everybody in there from Clarence Thomas to Bobby Seale, and everybody in between, and which is a good thing because we're not a monolithic group of individuals. We're all over the place. So you might have a comic book nerd and you might have a dude that never read a comic book a day in his life. Oh man, hold on.
Okay.
I got the camera on. So you might, and you might have a dude that is fresh out of jail and you might have a judge there. All of these people at the same time. So everybody's perspective is taken into account and everybody's perspective is as important as everybody else's. So regardless if you used to be on the block and you just got out, or if you're a president of a university, your opinion is valued in that barbershop. Outside of the barbershop, we know what that is. But inside the barbershop, everybody matters. And that's how the barbers went about their day-to-day activities. They'll greet you the same way no matter what. So this whole experience started my wheels to turn, and it's like, I got to document this. I have to have barbers talk about their experiences. I have to document barbers actually letting people know that they're more than barbers in the barbershop. Jeez Louise. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Can you hear me still?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Now I'm stuck. I'll still talk. Okay. So these experiences made me realize how important the barbershop was. So I wanted to document it. So I bought a camera and I just started talking to barbers. I started talking to barbers about why they became barbers. I started talking to barbers about how they have impacted their communities and so forth and so on. So in the midst of doing all of that, I just compiled a lot of video footage. I compiled a lot of data that led me to Dr. Mills's book. And so once I was able to read that book, it changed my whole perspective to know that Black barbers weren't even cutting Black people's hair initially. How many people even knew that, right? So that changed dramatically. So now I said, now I need the historical part of it, not just the day-to-day barbers, but how do we even start this? All right, I'm gonna get this camera to work, and Antonio, you talk about your project. But that's the nuts and bolts and the foundation of my my documentary, which is called The Perfect Blend. And I'll say that The Perfect Blend is a double entendre. So the perfect blend, talking about the perfect blend of individuals, the perfect blend of people, right, in the actual barbershop, because we have the whole gamut of different people. But it also is symbolic of the perfect haircut or the perfect blend. So that's the double entendre of my particular documentary.
Thank you, Antonio.
That's dope, Adolfo. And similar to, your thoughts about it being a home away from home and all that stuff, that kind of propelled me to the project as well. I grew up in Philly, and my mom's youngest brother was a barber, and he was the person still that I recognize as like the coolest superhero to me. He just was fly. He knew everybody. He knew all the latest music, was always wearing the, fly his clothes. And he was just very significant to me as a kid. And spending time with him in the barbershop was just incredibly valuable to me. Also being able to go to the barbershop with my dad on the weekends was really important to me because I got a chance to see him outside of just being my father, right? And as a kid who went to private school and spent more time than I would have liked as a kid in church, the barbershop was a third space for me. It shaped my perspective and my worldview of not only who I was, but who the world was around me from many different points of view. And so I have always recognized that there was something that was happening to me in the chair that I really could not explain. There was this magic, right? This of the transformation that I would go in feeling one way and come out after being turned and cut completely different. And it was really tied to my mental health and my well-being. And I thought that I was the only person, right, who had that sentiment. But I remember going to the Apollo one night on my birthday, and Hannibal Buress was performing, and he had this one little stand-up bit about, or it was an aside really, that, you know, sometimes he feels depressed, but he really just needs a haircut. And I was like, oh, that's me to some degree. So I thought about the project a little bit more or just thought about what the space meant to me. But it wasn't until I went to Cuba and I saw all of these really small shops just everywhere and talked about the limited resources that some of these barbers have. I was blown away by the impeccable fades and cuts that were coming out of these shops, but also the communities that were inside of them. As a photographer, as an artist, it just really piqued my interest to document and explore. And I thought about, okay, I really am drawn to the space. It made me think about, all of the major moments that happened in my life and how the barbershop was centered. And then it just made me think about how my barber in Philly is Muslim, and in between cuts, I would see him praying, and that was just really special and intimate to me in a way that I didn't really see in other spaces that I felt like could be home, but it represented a home and a healing space to me. And that's kind of how I came up with You Next. And You Next is a book that explores the barbershop through identity and wellness through about 12 different cities. It has some incredible essays. Dr. Mills has one there that is great. But it's a love letter, a love document to the space that I feel like has given me so much. And it really has given me an opportunity. And I hope that people who look at the book and have it as well, think about the ways in which we can reimagine it a little bit to serve us moving forward. And throughout the process of making the book, I saw so many ways in which that was evident. So, for example, going to Oakland and seeing, or being in LA and seeing barbers work really closely with doctors to implement routines and practices to check for diabetes or early signs of hypertension right there in the chair after the cut was like really significant and special. Or you think about how gentrification changes things with being able to vote in the places that we go to vote, and how there's a shop in Philly who has kind of filled that void for the community. So you can go to the barbershop and cast your ballot. It was just a really great opportunity for me to explore and see how we have grown, how the space has grown and continues to give us so much.
Wow, thank you. So here's a part where everyone can contribute now. And I want to give this to Aaron first because he was a barber, and then everyone else can join in. What has it been? What is the value of cutting men's hair? How was that important to you, Aaron? and what you do? Please share.
That's a good question. What's the value? And to be honest with you, it's priceless. And I say it's priceless because you don't know who's going to sit in your chair. Sometimes you get new clients that begin to be regular clients. If it wasn't for this one client I knew, I wouldn't be where I am today. Understand what I'm saying?
Right.
It was the relationship that you build. It's the friendships that you build, the secrets that you have to take to the grave with you. But it could be one relationship that in particular brought me from New York to Maryland. It was another relationship cultivated over time that gave me a different skill set so I could walk away from being a barber. But I think the greatest value outside of the relationship that you're building with men and the camaraderie and the overall sense of community, that I think the greatest value for me was watching young boys become men. Your son being one of them.
Yep.
You know, I remember cutting Jeremiah for the very first time and seeing how he's grown into a young man. CJ, you know, there's young men that I've cut where now they're fathers.
Yeah.
And I was like, I remember when you were in elementary school or you were in middle school, and to see these young men become productive people. I'm about to go to a graduation from a client of mine, former client. He's about to graduate college next month from Morehouse, and he's in political science. And don't be surprised if he becomes a senator or something.
Right.
But I'm going down to his graduation because it's important. That relationship started in the barbershop, and he needs to see that we do support that. There's other children that they still call me now, and they're grown, they're adults, they're late 20s, early 30s, and they look at me like a big brother because I've helped in a way kind of raise them, and they'll tell me that you helped me, you raised me, you've given me some information, you helped me through a situation. That's I think what a value is. It's in you putting something into someone else, helping them grow, and at the same time they're helping you grow.
Right.
It's truly a give and take situation, and a lot of us don't even realize it. But that's what a value is for me. I cherish it. I loved it. I'm grateful for the experiences, and I've met people who really changed my life. And yeah, that's what I have on that.
I just want to add, I've even seen you mature through barbering my son's hair from when he was younger to it seemed like there was a time where, oh, now I have to mature because he's watching me. I've seen that, you know, Aaron. So yeah.
And to that, I was young when I moved here. I was I think I'm still young. I think.
Yes, you are.
I was 22, 23, you know, fresh out of New York and in a brand new city. And I think Jeremiah started coming to me when maybe a first or second year being here. And so, yeah, I had to grow. Definitely. I had to grow. As these young kids were getting older, I was like, okay. And this time, is every one of us here knows, the older you get, you start to think a lot different.
Right.
And you start to see your actions and in the way you rub off on people. And it's like, okay, now it's time to do some things different. You realize the impact that you may have, especially in that position, because we do change lives. We do. I've had people in my chair who found their wife in the barbershop. You know what I mean? Literally, I cut the lady, then I cut the guy, and then the guy asked about the girl, and they're still married to this day. And that was in 99. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, it's a journey. It's a beautiful journey. And I applaud all you gentlemen who are doing the research and the documentation, because Dr. Mills, you just informed me something I never knew.
Right.
And Antonio, you just seen I just ordered your book. I will be ordering your book as well, Dr. Mills. And I just think it's wonderful because I have a love for photography myself. And at one point I wanted to do what you guys were doing, but I couldn't do it because I was behind the chair. So I just appreciate your appreciation for this craft and this art in this world that I was a part of. And so I look forward to seeing all of your projects.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Sherman, what has that value been like for you?
So, I mean, there are not a lot of spaces where I think Black men feel pampered. We don't do a lot of good self-care. We tend to say, well, I can just do these things at home and I'll take care of myself. And, you know, why would I spend the money to cut my hair? I can cut my own hair. I can save some money. And as I got older, I began to understand the value of treating myself to the best care possible isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And what I've learned is the wealthier people I know do the simple things in life that we always think are beyond our means. And so I would go to the barbershop to get a cut because my barber, shout out to Greg, understands how to cut my hair. And I too, Adolfo, am from Chicago, and that was where I got the first straight razor Shape Up.
Dr. Mills is from Chicago.
Oh, well, I should have known all this wisdom coming out the shop. I should have known.
Chicago was one of my favorite cities in the world. I love Chicago.
Sure.
I went to barbershops there and learned, there's a Shape Up with trimmers, and then there's a Shape Up with a straight razor. And in the barbershop, they laugh at you if you think that they're gonna put trimmers on your lineup to get you sharp. They're gonna get you clean, they're gonna shave you, but that's because it's a craft to them. And so once I started to look at it as not a luxury, but it's a necessity to treat myself well and go in and allow somebody who is a skin and barber, cosmetology, all of that has homogenized into a skill set. If my teeth hurt, I don't pull my own teeth. I go to a dentist. I go to somebody who's trained to address my teeth. The same thing with my face and my hair. Face and scalp. But I think it was important for me. And then as I began to go regularly, I would go every week to get a shave and to then sit in a chair on the side and engage. And we usually start with the sport, but then it always digresses and turns into politics and relationships. Or somebody will come in and start ranting about a girl they're dating, and then we all like, oh no. And as cliche as it sounds, it was life. Growing up in Chicago and then turning into a man in DC, it was how I learned to become a DC native. And I tell people all the time, I'm born and raised in Chicago, but DC is my home. And a lot of that homeness came from sitting in the barbershop.
I like how you said that, Sherman, because I used to tell people all the time, I didn't grow up in Baltimore, but I grew up in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Right. And those of us who've lived multiple places know exactly what you mean. Because I came to DC at 18. I'm 55 now. It is there was a lot of growing that took place on the streets of the District of Columbia.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyone else want to talk about that value?
I wanted to talk a little bit about what Dr. Mills talked about, which is in the documentary as well. Is there are neighborhood barbershops, and then there are places that people get their hair cut. So a barbershop has a fabric to it. It has a DNA to it. If there's not discussion, if there's not some books where people are talking about it, if they're not doing community activity, I don't look at that the same way, right? So for barbershops that are community based, you might have a young man who is on a baseball team, and that whole barbershop is going to actually support that young man, whether it be buying whatever he's selling to buy new uniforms or actually go to his games, right? So that's the realness. That's the importance of the barbershop, is community building, because not only do you see that person as a quote unquote customer, you see that person eventually as family. Because the barbershop that I first started going to in Richmond, there are 4 generations of people that have been going to that barbershop, right? So they see the value of that barbershop, they see the essence of that barbershop, and they understand the way that barbershop embraces them is nothing but love. So it's important to distinguish barbershops from places you get your hair cut. Just like it's a difference between a barber and a person who cuts your hair. That you have to make that distinction. A barber is doing any and everything to make sure that cut, because you can have, I learned this just doing the documentary. I talked to a barber who says you can have 2 barbers. One is a really good barber from a technical standpoint, like he is flawless. Then you can have a barber, he's a 10. So then you can have a barber that maybe is an 8.5. But the barber that's an 8.5 is personable. He's making you feel, your wife or whomever comes feel like they're, as important as anybody else. They're talking to you about your problems. They're talking to you about or connecting you to things that you might not have been connected to. That's the difference between a barber and a person that cuts your hair. That person, that 8.5 barber, is going to have more clientele than that barber just can cut real good. Eventually, long term, that barber is going to stay in business a very, very long time because of who they are and what they offer beyond just cutting hair.
Agreed. It's about the relationship. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that value. We all are horrified and concerned and angry and scared about ourselves, but also about young Black boys who are just trying to navigate the world. And we have police forces across the country trying to get our boys in line. Some of them, well-intentioned, are trying to keep them from going to jail, but they're pushing them into jail and they're pushing them into graves, right? And so barbershops can potentially, right, provide this. We talk about value, right, and the relationships and the generations, right? Barbershops have the potential, right, to become, and something many of them are, these spaces that provide refuge for our boys who are just, they're kids, right? Particularly kids trying to go home, go to school, make it back home. And sometimes they act as kids and do things that kids shouldn't do, but that's what all kids do. Right. And there's some place where they shouldn't supposed to be and all this stuff. And, barbershops can certainly be this space of grounding of home that's made, home that's remade over time. Right. And I certainly don't buy into arguments that barbershops are automatically places where boys come to be men. Certainly there are some men in barbershops thinking, I don't want my son learning from them. Right. But again, I think that, with very thoughtful intentions, I think thoughtful intentions from the owners of these shops and the barbers who can certainly shape their particular barbershops to be the kinds of spaces that many of us have grown up in. Again, to sort of wrap our arms around boys who are, are just targets at this point, because the police are afraid of them. The police are afraid of our 10, 12, 13-year-old boys, and it's just freaking maddening, right? And so the value, we're talking about this value, and I'm just adding to what my brothers here have said, right? The relationships and the trust and the intimacy and all that. You just can't beat it. Yeah, you can get that from the church, absolutely. But that comes with professions of faith, right? Like barbershops, or you can get that from a bar, but of course you got to drink to go to a bar. Right. Barbershops are that kind of organic, natural space that anyone can just come in and out of, and you don't have to be anybody, right? And so I think the value is really, really important, even for folks who are moving out of neighborhoods. They still come back to that barbershop, right? Come back to that church that they grew up in, right? No matter if I'm moving to the suburbs, I'm still going to Mr. Harvey's, for example, right? I'm going to still do that work. And so, the value is really the
Absolutely. I like what you said. I want to touch a word you said, the intimacy. And because the barber experience is an intimate experience. Yeah. You are literally taking somebody and recreating their appearance. Yeah. And they are trusting you with their conversation, their time. And what the customer doesn't always realize is us as barbers, we take in a lot. We take in a lot, and it's different energies, it's different personalities, and we have to stay on point at all times. And nobody's perfect. But it is an intimacy thing. And I've always appreciated when guys sit in my chair with women, children, and they can just talk. They can just be themselves. I've literally seen men walk in with their wives. As soon as their wives go, oh man, I'm glad she got out of here. Because they just need that space to be there.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? So it is, but
no, I was just gonna say, think about it. Where else does that happen?
Nowhere else.
I mean, even in churches, listen, and I'm a preacher. I'm telling you, it doesn't happen in churches with the freedom, just like Dr. Mills just said, that it happens in a barbershop. where you don't, I don't have to be pre-qualified to share with you. I mean, who else gets to touch my face? And the proximity, we are literally this close in a non-sexual space. There's no other institution where somebody's that close and you're not uncomfortable. I'm comfortable because you are that close, because I see the level of detail that you're willing to go to make sure that, like you said, my appearance is changed, but also you're still managing my health, physical health, social health, my epidermal health. You're taking all of that in, and yeah, you receive all of it. We dump all of that on you guys, but you have to do like I have to do, is have to go and have a valve to let all of that out, so that Aaron doesn't become the cauldron that everybody's issues get dumped into. And so, and I salute you for doing it. I salute you all for researching it and then telling our story. I think part of the reason why we are so misunderstood is because people don't know our stories. Yeah. They don't know our stories. They know the stories that other people tell about us. But this is us telling our story about what the barbershop means to us, not just what it means in entertainment, but what it means for our edification and what it means. You're right. People will, I will drive all the way. I live in Waldorf. I will drive all the way back into DC to go to the barbershop, because when I'm there, it is my clubhouse. I didn't grow up in Chicago. We have a space that had no treehouse. But I used to always watch TV and be like, man, I wish I had a treehouse, because I'd have all my boys over and we sit in there and eat apples and do stuff. But I didn't. But the barbershop is a grown man's treehouse. And that's where we get to go and relive the good and the bad parts of our lives.
That's an absolute fact.
With Dr. Antonio, you had something?
No, you can go.
Oh, okay. I was going to say what Dr. Mills said about the police. So I've been in the barbershop where a police officer is talking to the rest of the customers about various things that police are going through, right? So that not to excuse any behaviors, but they are actually educating people about how police think, right? So that's a Black person who has Black people's best interests at heart, is talking to the community about these are the things that you need to do or not do. Not that, sometimes it doesn't even matter. The end result can actually be, death, but they put you into the mind of that. So that's the importance of the barbershop. Where else are you going to have a police officer have full transparency and just spill his guts and tell you this is what they looking at, this is what they're looking for, this is what you need not to do, this is what you need to do. So in the barbershop, you having these conversations, and that's just one aspect of it. There's so many other things. You have book clubs that are being started in the barbershop, chess clubs, back to school drives. Barbers are giving these young people haircuts for free if they bring home A's, or if they even go from a D to a C, right? Just showing progress. So that's what I'm talking about with the community barbershop. Not all people do that, because they're not, other barbershops, they're not actually communicating and just cutting your hair. But in these community based barbershops, these are the things that's going on that changes children's lives, right? I've talked to a barber in Philly, and I'm interviewing him, and in the midst of the interview, he's crying. This is a big, strong, tough dude, but he's crying because he said that the impact he sees the children, when children look at him, they look at an upstanding individual, a person that is doing something positive with his life. He said, and you may not necessarily know that, but he said he can talk to these children and see that he's impacting their communities, right? So it's important that we look at barbers beyond cutting hair. So that was fascinating to me. It just threw me off, because I'm just videoing, talking to him about different aspects, and he just starts crying, right? And he's not the only barber that I interviewed that cried, right? Because a lot of times barbering, a lot of barbers sometimes come from prison, right? Or they come from a space where they have a felony.
Right.
And it's hard for them to actually get a job in other industries, or a job that's going to make them some money, right? Yeah. So what happens is barbering is a gateway to entrepreneurship, an easier way to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So that's important, and we need to know that. So these brothers have changed their lives, and they start to see the value of them changing their lives and how they're impacting other people. So that's another aspect of the barbershop that needs to be told as well.
This is all great information. I wanted to ask you all, Aaron, by cutting hair, Sherman, by going to the barbershop, by Antonio and Adolfo and Dr. Mills, working on your projects and doing the research, what did you learn about yourself from the barbershop? From the different perspectives. So Aaron, as a barber, what did you learn about yourself? Sherman, what did you learn about yourself sitting in that chair in those moments?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I think I tell people often, I used to tell actually some of my clients, I said, if you ever want to know about yourself, get into a relationship. Because that person that you're with, they will be a reflection of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of my clients, whether I've had great days, bad days, whatever, a lot of my clients showed me who I was, also showed me who I wasn't.
Mm.
And not saying that's not necessarily good or bad, but they changed my thinking, helped me see myself from a different perspective, because most of us are innately, we have our own selfish view of how we think we are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very limited, very, very narrow scope. But when you have somebody else that's like, no, you do this or you do that, you learn a lot about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the biggest answer for that question. A lot of people showed me who I was and who I wasn't, in a constructive, good way. I've seen some of my shortcomings that I've had to overcome. And what else? I'll say that's pretty much the discipline, actually. That's pretty much that. Because your people are not gonna lie to you. The ones that are entrusting you with, they're not gonna lie to you.
Right.
They're gonna show you who you are.
Right.
And they're seeing things in you that you don't see.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't realize it because you're going on about your day. You're cutting hair, but these people see you every week, sometimes twice a week, every month.
Yeah.
They're seeing you. They're interacting with you, and a lot of us we lose sight of that. We do. It's so easy to just get caught up in our grind that no, these people are watching you.
Yep.
Someone's always watching.
Yep. Anyone else want to add?
Well, I'll say this. From a mental health standpoint, I thought that obviously in the Black community, particularly with Black males, people talk about the lack of mental health, of us taking care of our mental health. Really and truly, a lot of times what you have in the Black barbershop is Black men getting those mental health needs met without a professional. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying, not dismissing a professional. Of course, we need professionals, but just them opening up might lend itself to a conversation that, hey, right, you might need to go to a professional, because what you told me is, some deep stuff, but I may not be able to help you. Right. But they feel comfortable in the barbershop. You feel comfortable. Therefore, you're opening up. And then you may hear somebody else to say, hey, I know somebody. Because a lot of times we're not going to go to a professional because they don't look like us. So if we know somebody that looks like us, then we're going to be more apt to actually go into that direction. So that's one thing I learned about myself, is that I was actually going into the barbershop to unleash, some just negative things that were going on inside myself. So I'm going to the barbershop to say, hey, I need to make sure that I get this off my chest. Right. And sometimes maybe not necessarily even talking about what's the issue, but we're actually talking about something else, to taking my mind off of that. Right. And making me be at ease at that particular point. And the other thing I think I learned was that with black, not learn, but to reaffirm that Black men are dope. Right. And we come from all walks of life. And we come from all all type of upbringings, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a commonality where we can't actually share each other's hopes and dreams, and we can't impact each other's lives no matter where you come from. The barbershop has really shown me that the value of a Black man is, there's nowhere else that it is unabashedly, unadulteratedly pure inside that barbershop. It's all about you, right? And that's the only place I think that I've been in this world, but outside of my home, obviously, that I feel value to that degree. And the Black men in the barbershop that I go to, shout out to McCormick's, is actually, the name has changed. Those brothers, you know, and the environment that they created changed my life for the better, for the forever. So I start to look at things a little more introspectively. I start to look at things a lot more broadly sometimes, to look at everybody's point of view, because you never know what somebody is dealing with, and you never know where somebody is coming from. Once you understand where they're coming from, you understand them. And a lot of times we look at people for face value, whether they, you know, whether it be just their outer appearance or what. You don't judge a book by its cover in the barbershop, because somebody might pull you aside and be like, yo, you know, he just got a divorce, or, you know what I'm saying? Whatever. You just never know. So
that's not always true though, right? Like that's not always true. That sometimes like the barbershop can be like some tough discourse can happen where you are
absolutely
by what you look like and how you show up to the space. And I think that it's important for us to remember that as well. Like the barbershop is a site for uplifting Black men and affirming our identity and how we present ourselves to the world. But also it can be a tough spot for women who come in there with their children. It can be tough for people who have queer identities. But I do think that it is important for us to be cognizant of the capacity, right? The barbershop has the capacity to be better. And I think that if we're all mindful of that, it can serve us in a more fruitful manner. But I think for me, you know, I realized that about myself, that I was much more comfortable just going into spaces than I thought that I would be before I started this project. Whether it was, you know, walking around Chicago by myself with just my camera, or DC, like all these cities, like I would just be walking around, going into shops, introducing myself and talking about my project. And I really felt a sense of community that I did not expect to happen that way, right? That I kind of just leaned on what I knew that I had, which was just me being me, just me showing up and just hoping that my brothers, right, would support me in a way that they did. And I'm very thankful for that. So I learned a lot about myself from just being comfortable in being in spaces with Black men, because I feel like a lot of times when people see us, and I think when I say people, it's tough to say this because it is through the lens of the white gaze, right? Because we know that we can commune together and have a good time, but when the attention is on the white gaze, it can be difficult to see all of these Black men together. And I'm just really thankful that all these Black men supported me, and I support them through this project.
Right. Awesome. Dr. Quincy.
Quickly, so I'm fairly introverted, so I would, you know, I'm comfortable being, you know, in, you know, solitude with a book or something like that. But I think that what I've learned about myself through doing the research and talking with barbers and a number of folks is the power of presentation, particularly. I think we don't think enough about how much people learn from us without ever talking to us. Right. And I've had to sort of sit and reflect on my mentors, but also the mentors who never knew they were mentors to me. Right. Because I simply watched them right? I just watched how they moved. I watched how they talked. I watched how they interacted with people. I watched their relationships. Never sought advice from them, but their actions were the advice, right? And so, and I sort of thought about that within the context of the barbershop, but also how I, again, like I don't actually go to barbershops often. My hair will just grow and it'll just be a sort of a wild mess, but an organized mess, right? And I'm fine with that. But there's a way in which I think that as I enter certain stages of my life as I get older, I have thought more about, okay, what are people learning from me? Right. Yes, I do mentor my students and I enjoy that. But there are students who may never talk to me, but they're looking at everything I do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that providing those kinds of models for students and for young folk, but also for my peers, right, are important because I think that we all learn from each other, even if we're not asking for instruction, but we are learning from each other. And so I think it's important for me to, one, just be present, right, and be around, but also just be in conversation and in community always.
Can I piggyback off of that? Great point, Dr. Mills. You said something to the effect of we're all learning from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Being around other barbers and even some of the clients, I think every man who's in this forum today can, or if you ask any man in a barbershop, they'll tell you, like you said, your mentors may have not said the word to you. You learning from people who come to the shop on a regular basis. There's men who's helped shape the man I am. And we might have had maybe 3 or 4 conversations in years, but I've seen how they move as I was growing up. I've seen how they talk. And so their influence from either they were a client or they were another barber, they influenced me into the person I am. So that's very, very real that you say that you have sometimes mentors that they may not speak to you directly, but you're learning something from them. You're definitely picking something up. And I think that's powerful, man. I really do. Because if it wasn't for certain people, I probably wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have certain values that I have now. And again, it's just watching how this brother moves, or watching how that brother moves, or watching how this person handles their business, how they present themselves. It's important. Like I said, somebody's always watching, and we're watching. Us being barbers, we're watching too. So,
Right.
So y'all being the clients, man, I'm saying thank you to y'all because we get just as much as y'all may get from us.
Right.
Trust me.
Thank you. So this is my last question. Do you think that will the barbershop continue to be a sacred space for Black men? And what do you imagine it looking like in the future? So do you think that, and I want to start with Dr. Mills for this question, because due to his research, his formal research, and looking at how the barbershop has grown over the years, what is it? What do you think? Is it changing? Is it ever evolving? What?
Sure. So, and I'll be quick. First thing I'll say, I don't actually want it to be sacred, because I think that once we make something sacred, it becomes unquestioned, and we don't want to touch it, and we don't want to think about its evolution, and we don't want to question its problems, right? Like the church is sacred. It's sick things. There are things in the church that you just don't. If you question, then you are considered. What's wrong with you, right? I don't actually want it to be sacred. I want it to be something that is open for democratic engagement, right? And so with that said, yes, I do think it's going to change. I think certainly social media is changing, and certainly post-COVID, it's going to change how folks move about in that space. And in some shops, I think many barbershops are going to stick with appointment only, because some have found it to be, some folks I've talked to have found it to be quite organizing, right? In the sense that they have a good sense of their schedule, as opposed to when folks just sort of drop in. There's some customers who are not gonna want to sit, and they, my appointment's at 2, I'm gonna come in at 2 and I'm gonna leave at 2:30. I'm concerned about that because I think what we lose is that organic engagement and interaction, and political discussions and so forth. So, but overall, folks are going to still need to go somewhere to get a haircut, So that we know that is not going to change. We can't social media our way to a haircut, right? We can't, that can't change. I don't think that, I mean, there are ways in which some folks are thinking about franchises within the Black barbering community. Some ideas have legs, some don't. And so I think that we might see some of that a little bit. If done well, I think it can be quite interesting. But I think that the core piece, which is what my brothers here have sort of talked about, is having a space where folk can relax and think and talk and unwind. I don't think that's going to change, even though Black communities are being gentrified. Again, I think that if shops don't get gentrified out, meaning if folks are raising rents and the lease is getting harder for folks to stay, so we have to keep an eye on that and certainly talk to city councils to be sure that barbershops are protected in a certain kind of way. That's going to take some activity and some activism on our parts. And so those are some things that I'm concerned about and thinking about. And I think some changes that might happen again in terms of how folks are interacting in spaces across the country.
Excellent. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll tell you what you.
Well, in terms of it changing, right? I don't want it to be sacred either. I consider it to be sacred, but I do think that it should be challenged and questioned, right? But I think that when it comes to the evolution of the barbershop, I really am inspired by models of the barbershop internationally. So, Thailand or Dakar in Senegal, like there are these open spaces where people can come to get their cuts, right? And when we think about what's happened with COVID and how the intimacy and the proximity that we have has posed a challenge, I think that we could learn something and be inspired by what's happening internationally and recreate that to some degree so that we don't have to have those same concerns.
Awesome.
I do feel like there's a lot of the fundamental things that have changed over time. I think social media has changed the barber industry a lot.
Yes.
A whole lot. It's taking things to a different level as far as how people even cut hair now. And a lot of these barbers, I'm gonna just keep it 100. They're not barbers. They're cutting hair and they're spraying hair. I'm gonna call a spade here. The actual art of it is changing. So as that's changing, and we have this post-COVID, a lot of it is changing. It is. If you remember the old shop I used to work at, it was an old school feel to it.
Yes.
When's the last time you've seen a shop that had that feel to it?
Nope.
That feeling is not like it used to be. So I do think the conversations will remain the same. We're going to talk about sports, relationships, things of that nature. However, your sitting time now, you can't just sit in a barbershop like you used to. No, at least not here in Maryland.
Right.
You have to have an appointment, which I'm all for appointments. I always was. But now you got to go. There's no lingering anymore. So that part of it, like the doctor said, that is changing.
Right.
And as people evolve and change, what we do is going to evolve and change, and how we do it. So I worry sometimes about it because, again, that feeling is I don't have the feeling. Even the last shop I worked at, I didn't have that feeling of like when I did at the old shop.
Right.
It's just a different energy. It's a different mindset. So I have my own worries and fears about it personally. But what do you do?
I'm afraid for the younger boys that are coming up now. They won't have that family experience, the old school experience like we see in the pictures in Antonio's book or what we're going to see in Adafo's documentary. I'm worried about that. So I think to a certain extent that as Black men, you all need to preserve the space.
And not just a space, but that feeling, what it represents, what it's about. It was about art. It was about fashion. It was about conversation. It was about family. It was about growth. And if we get away from that, then you got to look at, that's not just in the barbershop, that's in our culture.
Right.
You know, it transcends beyond the shop, but that was the general hub.
Right.
But everything is changing, and like you said, you have those fears. I definitely have those same fears as well.
Right.
It's change is good, but not all change is good.
Right. Right.
It's certain things that you just want to preserve.
Right.
Think about, I don't know if families still do holidays like they used to.
Nope.
I know mine doesn't. It's just not that same feeling anymore. And I think the more we get away from it, I think it's going to get worse. That's just not trying to be a pessimist. I got two eyes.
Mm-hmm. Well, gentlemen, that is our time. But before we go, can you please tell listeners how they can connect with you if they want to, have you on their panel, check out some of your work, follow you on social media, starting with Dr. Mills?
Certainly, yeah. If you want to contact me, certainly my email address at UMaryland is qtmills, MILLS, at umd.edu. My Twitter handle is Quincy T. Mills, at Quincy T. Mills.
Thank you. Antonio.
You can reach out to me directly on all social media. It's Antonio M. Johnson. Check out my site for information about the book. You can buy prints, posters. I did like a little sticker pack to promote everything. That is Antonio so the hyphen Johnson.com. If you want to send me an email, it's tone@antonio-johnson.com.
And tell us the name of your book again. Hold it up, please.
Okay. The name of the book is You Next, Reflections in Black Barbershops. It's available wherever books are sold. You can support a local Black-owned bookshop. That's my favorite way to support. But it really is. It feels like a family photo album to me of just images of shops from all over the country, of people like Dr. King's barber, who let me come into his home for like 2 hours and just chat, about how special and important the space is and how we can reimagine it moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you. Adafo?
The Perfect Blend documentary on Instagram, and then on Instagram you can see my email or what have you. So I'm not big into social media. I post every now and then, but I'm going to hire somebody once we get closer to the documentary coming out, but that's just not my thing. I enjoy social media. I just don't enjoy posting because I'd rather look at other people's stuff. But I do want to plug Dr. Mills' book again.
Oh, thanks, man.
I'm serious. Like he's a really humble brother and he's good, but this is unmatched research about barbering, right? And barbers. I mean, it's top of the line. I mean, it should be dissected. I actually use it. I'm an adjunct professor and I use it in my class.
That's
and
good.
So it's that well researched. But anyway, yeah, the Perfect Blend document, huh?
It truly is.
I mean, you read this book, it's mind blowing. Like it's unmatched. If you look up if you Google barbershop books, his book will pop up.
Yes.
Like more, you ain't even have to put his name in. So it speaks for itself.
Dr. Milton, people purchase your book?
Same anywhere books most I don't know where. I hate to plug Amazon because they're a monster. But certainly I think most places where books are sold, and the book is published by the University of Pennsylvania Press. So UPenn Press, you can certainly get it there. But I think most used bookstores should have it. But also you can go to the public library. So I want to obviously also promote public library. So please, you can look it up at public library and check it out there as well.
Thank you so much. Sherman?
I'm on all social media platforms, Sherman M. Nelson 2. I have been trying to make notes for 2 new books I need to add to my shelf, and a documentary that I'm going to be prepared to watch. I appreciate it. And I have learned one thing. If I don't support you, I can't tell other people to.
Right.
And so I'm going to go out, and I also don't want to buy it from Amazon. So I'm going to find a bookseller in the district who looks like me, and I can pour into them, and they can pour into you.
Sankofa, that's right.
Always Sankofa always works.
Always.
Matter of fact, I'm gonna go down there today, try to get it. I'm not on any social media. And again, I am a retired barber, but if anybody ever wants my input, you can reach me at AJW Trades. That's AJWTRADES 16 at Gmail.
Thank you guys so much for allowing me to showcase your stories, for doing your part in changing the narrative, and lastly, for keeping your commitment by being a part of the conversation. That means an awful lot to me. If you've enjoyed the show, please let us know. We would love to shout you out and post your comments. If you or someone you know is changing the narrative, please contact us at ichangethenarrative@gmail.com. We would love to share your story. Meet us here next Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.